Hello and welcome to the 84 Million podcast. Today we're on episode number 22. And our guest today is Mr. Robbie Coleman. So what do we say about Robbie? Robbie is an award-winning film photographer and documentary director. He's a writer whose work has been featured or syndicated in the New York Times. Robbie is also a musical artist with a debut LP coming out in 2025, and his new single, Smile, is out now on all streaming platforms. In addition to all of this, Robbie serves as creative director at the Litecoin Foundation and is currently focusing his efforts on Litecoin's VPM, which of course we're going to discuss today. Robbie can be found on X at Robert F. Coleman. Robbie, welcome to the show.
Hey, that was a great intro. Thanks for having me. I didn't realize we were going to plug my music. I would have had something playing, you know?
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to plug your music until I read about it yesterday. And I'm realizing, because I write all these bios for everybody, which I enjoy doing. It helps me get to know them a little bit better. I'm like, I don't know, you're kind of a polymath or something, at least in the artistic realm. You're doing all sorts of things, which is
just a facade,
which is amazing. A very productive facade. I enjoyed it. I listened to it on Spotify, by the way. You have it linked, so I'm not leaking any unknown information. If you go to Robbie's X, he does have his new song linked, Smile. So go check that out. But yeah, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, with all that you do in the world, and I know we're not about personalities here, with all that you do in the world and the different talents that you do have, what brought you to Litecoin, the currency? I'm not even talking about the foundation, just the currency. What brought you to Litecoin?
It's a really good question. I mean, when I talk about this, I always unfortunately mention my dad, and he hates it. So I'm going to mention him again. I guess growing up, I grew up with an economist for a father. And so he's taught me about, I guess, the traditional landscape, financial landscape. And like I was charting seasonal factors instead of kicking a soccer ball. And that probably explains why not many of my achievements are physical. But yeah, I mean, as I grew older and he grew older, we didn't have much to talk about. And one of the things I was sort of interested in just half-heartedly was buying drugs. Sorry, I mean, buying Bitcoin. And, you know, talking to my friends about it. And so I said to Dad, what do you know about this asset class? And he didn't know anything. And so I looked into it a bit more. And as I looked into it a bit more, it became less about speculation. It became less about, I guess, accumulation of certain goods on the internet. And it became more of a vehicle to opening up a discourse with my dad. And it's never progressed. He's still of that blockchain, not Bitcoin mindset. But quite simply, I was buying Bitcoin, I was buying Ethereum, I was buying Litecoin, but I was buying all the early tokens too. And Litecoin really struck me. It was you know, in the top 5, I think, when I got in terms of markup. And it was certainly one of the only currencies that sort of made sense. And it only made sense because of the analogy to Bitcoin. And I vaguely understood Bitcoin. So that's how I found myself intrigued by Litecoin.
Good deal. And I think there is a good analogy between Bitcoin and Litecoin. And I think it's natural and somewhat posited by Charlie and his early writings, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's strong. Some people kind of try to shake it. Oh, you know, Litecoin's this or that, and we can have new narratives. That's fine. But I still think the silver to Bitcoin's gold thing is a pretty good one.
If I'm being honest,
personal one that I like.
I wasn't a massive fan until I think I was researching something, maybe the 10th anniversary post for
Big post.
It was a milestone post, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was going through the very early Bitcoin Talk forum and going through I read absolutely every one of Charlie's responses, every one of his posts, and all of his monikers too. Not many people know that. I won't dox those because some people don't know them still. And there are a couple of monikers. So I went through everything, and it was quite eloquent, the analogy. And I mean, I work in strategy, I work in branding, I work in positioning things, and it was really eloquent. And so I called him not long after that and said, I finally get it. Like, I've been working on Litecoin for how many years? And anyway.
Yeah, because you'd already been in the foundation by the time that he had made that post. Did you join in 2017? I think
Well,
that's
Charlie
correct.
actually made that. Charlie made that post 3 days before he activated Litecoin. So
Correct.
3 days.
That's the Bitcoin, or a light version of Bitcoin launched. But you mentioned you read his 10-year thread, but you were already at the foundation at that time.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
So I joined the foundation in roughly 2017.
Okay.
They were having their first summit, and I had a creative agency at the time called The Tokens, and I set about rebranding a token or something in the space. And because I was pretty obsessed with Litecoin, it became that. And I enjoyed the challenge of I guess, inverted commas, rebranding something in the decentralized space. And I guess this is a great precedent for our chat today. But, the logo that I flew to San Francisco and had on a little USB and brought Charlie into a room, and we'd never met before. I said, I've got 65 pages to go through, and he goes, I'll give you 5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. That's cool. That's cool. I change the story every time. I'm pretty sure that's pretty close to it. But took him through all this work, and we had consulted with the community in Reddit and at least early days, crypto Twitter. And we'd done a little bit of qualitative research and tried to do quant, but the sample size wasn't there. So it was informed by the community, but really it was when it got the endorsement of the foundation that it sort of became more prevalent and omnipresent, and that being the more slim L and the blue that is more recognizable. And we do have a silver, which a lot of people still use, and then that little simple typeface. So it was quite nice. But that was my foray into Litecoin. And then because I really liked David Schwartz, and he just joined, and you were mentioning him before we went on air. I get to say that.
Fair enough. Yep.
Before we went live. And we're talking about David, but he's a great guy. And I said, if the foundation's anything like this, so I joined, and I haven't looked back. I've looked back a couple of times. There's been bumps everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's been good.
And you keep showing up. And I was grateful to meet you in Nashville, 2 months ago now. So I'm glad you shared that story. I'm not sure how many people know about how you joined. I only found out your kind of entry into the foundation maybe within the last year, but it's huge. And, I think Bitcoin has become in some ways sort of a personality cult. We know all the names and who's doing things, at least, well, maybe they're not doing much, or they're talking a lot and maybe have a lot of wealth. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But, I think sometimes we're the opposite in Litecoin. We might be doing a lot of things and nobody who's doing any of it, and hopefully we're improving on those lines. Maybe there's a balance between total humility and unnecessary humility versus, just talking in the personality, aggrandizements. But you've done a lot of work for Litecoin, and you really the face we see, at least at the foundation level, kind of, like you said, rebranding it, making it uniform, creating a media pack for people if they want to share the official, at least in terms of the foundation, graphic. That was you. And I know Lotion shared with me that you were going through color palettes to set up the, Litecoin space.
Oh yeah.
And which is a gorgeous website. So we all take it for granted, the face that looks so nice, and you're the guy who did it.
Yeah. It's kind of it's a really cool job. I get to be creative director of a decentralized currency. It's sick. And sick, for those who don't know, that's an Australian expression. It's not really. It's just like cool. Probably, I don't know. My son he'd yeet me out of here or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea. So sorry for everyone listening. But it's cool.
I think the Americans understand sick. The other stuff we may not. I'll leave it to the younger people, like you're saying. Yeah.
Jump in the comments and, correct me. But it's a good job. And by job, I mean, it's not my full-time job. I love Litecoin, and that's why I'm in there. And everyone who's working in there could be working in a big industry doing something. Instead, they dedicate their time to Litecoin. So it's more than that. But yeah, Loshan, listen, I love Loshan. He's great, but he is a nightmare to work with. And I'm happy to go on record saying that, because one of my jobs is not just being creative director, but it's I guess almost being translator for the lay person. And usually I'm pretty good at translating. I'm not a technologist by heart, but I've worked in enough technology companies and started enough that I know enough. And when I don't know enough, I can ask the right questions usually. But he's phenomenal. That was a disaster. Yeah, I think I did maybe 110 pages of work.
Wow.
Like, it was crazy amount for this what was very simple in the end, because I finally understood it and went, so you only need hex codes. And he's like, that's what they are. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, it looks good. It looks very good.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's absolutely my favorite in Explorer. And without going into that, we're going to need Lotion back in the future. But MWeb at some point is going to be searchable there too. Currently, it's only MWeb Explorer that you can find MWeb transactions. But exciting things coming with Litecoin space. But well, good to chat here, Robbie. Let's transition to maybe the topic here, and that's VPM. Right. And I'll just say a word, and we'll let you go. But you shared this at the summit. You published a white paper, which I do have printed in front of me, which is available at vpm.run. That was published on July 25th of this year. And I think this is a very important idea. The white paper, which I just referenced, I'm going to read right from it. It leads with, quote, economic freedoms for billions have been irrecoverably compromised. Governments, nation states, and powerful financial institutions are infringing on the universal human right of financial freedom and digital privacy. Again, very powerful language. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be fully honest. I was meant to talk about central bank digital currencies in Nashville, and I've done that talk a few times. And that's something I'm passionate about. And I'm not off on a tangent here. It's how I arrived at VPM. But I was in China a couple of weeks beforehand, and I'd not really used a VPN, so a virtual private network. I'd not really used one before. I'd used them out of necessity for getting the latest Netflix stuff or something from iTunes back in the day, and it being geo-blocked. And that's much like 45% of VPN users, but I'll go into the stats later.
Yeah, please do.
And I was in China, and I was using this thing, and then I asked a friend of mine who works in security, and by security I mean in the intelligence security in Australia. He was along for the ride because I was with a delegation. And the long story short is, he was talking to me about the advent should I say the crazy acquisition of VPNs in China. And he saw them, come to the fore 4 or 5 years ago, with the advent of the ECNY, so their, I guess, digital currency, their CBDC. And so I was sitting here with a VPN for the first time, and I started looking and studying and researching, and because I'm curious, and I started to envision the nodes. Like I looked at NordVPN, and it claims to have decentralized servers in 3,000 places across the world, and that's why it can't be brought down. I'm like, that sounds similar to something else I know. Mm-hmm. And so I started visualizing the nodes and thinking about them, and I obviously worked on the Explorer with Lotion, so it's becoming more familiar with that. And then I started thinking about the motivations and the drivers for using a VPN. And I was in China, and it was not because I was trying to use Netflix over there. It was because I was worried about my digital privacy and security. I was worried about, effectively being surveilled while I was in China. And it turns out I'm not, tinfoil hat man. It's a very common occurrence. And I started thinking, why is it different for money? And I've been obsessed with CBDCs for a while. And by obsessed, I mean, it becomes the thing I read about at night or discuss, with my dad. And to me, I'm really pleased that the Australian pilot has failed. But when they do come into effect and they are working as well as the ECNY, which is the Chinese EE1, it really is end-to-end surveillance. So if you think about it, they've got more cameras, more digital surveillance on the street than anywhere in the world. So London used to have the highest penetration of CCTV, but obviously where's my phone? They can activate anyone's phone at any time, and that's 2.2 smartphones to every person in China. They've also got a heap of public surveillance. And then I was walking through a train station, just let me through. And it's because my ticket had already been paid for and I didn't know, but it was through Alipay. And it knew who I was. It recognized me. It knew I'd paid. And I was like, this is it. This is the last piece. They know where I am. They know what I'm doing. They know what I'm doing on the internet, what I'm looking up, what I'm buying, who I'm sending money to, where I'm traveling to, what I'm going to do next. And if you think about how smart the algorithms are in terms of just an Amazon, everyone uses this add to cart thing. Imagine for extrapolating that across a subject matter of, or a sample size of 2 billion people and getting all of their lives and starting to run an algorithm and seeing their spending behaviors and then stopping them from spending in certain ways and censoring their life through currency. And so I thought we need to work on this. And obviously MWeb exists. And since March of this year, so it's now September, but since March I'd been working just in private. I don't like to announce things even to people at the foundation until I know that something is clicked. And I hadn't announced to anyone I was working on it, but I was working on a strategy for MWeb. And that strategy was really to try and identify, first understand it. Second, identify how to inextricably link it with something, whether it was Litecoin or privacy or something, and also how to translate it for the layperson. And I was really struggling because every word I came up with had connotations that I didn't like or that elicited a certain feeling or it said something I didn't want it to say. And then it all clicked that why not use, just like Charlie did back in the day, an analogy. And an analogy which, 1.6 billion people know. So 1.6 billion people, and that's a B, in case you can't understand my accent or I'm tired or whatever. But that's a billion use a VPN and they're active users. And I found that stat crazy. And it's the comprehension of what it is. It's in the 80%, like it's in the 20th percentile. So it's 80% of users understand what it does. So they might not necessarily be able to explain it, but they understand what it does. And that being affording you relative privacy on the internet. And so I thought that was a pretty, not watertight analogy, but pretty good analogy for the motivations and drivers as to why, and the benefits as to why you would use MWeb in your daily life. So VPM.
Very good. I think this is excellent what you're doing with this reframing of what already exists. And I think it is very palatable and more understandable, definitely more than MWeb, because we're the nerds that like to sit around and talk about MWeb and everything else. And I'm guilty. I mean, we're a podcast that looks at Litecoin. I should know something. And by the way, I don't know what David knows. I mean, there's a lot of people that know more than I do, but we're interested in that sort of thing. But that's not really palatable to the rest of the world that would benefit from this. Like you're saying, there's so many people that use VPNs. And I'm glad to see that they're being used successfully in China, because I wasn't sure that they were. If we hear about the great firewall of China sort of thing, I'm glad to see that there's penetration beyond that. I have not visited. I've been to Asia, but I've not been to China, East Asia, I should say. I used a VPN. I've been using one for several years. I've gone between different ones based upon kind of the information that I got, and I don't. How do I say it? Some people believe there is no privacy left. Like everything has a backdoor in it. It's a futile. Why are we even bothering? I haven't let the idea of privacy die. Some of the stuff's beyond my pay grade, but I'm going to do what I can do to obfuscate what I can obfuscate when I should obfuscate successfully. And I don't think there's anything wrong, criminal or anything concerning about that. Like you said, money should be private historically. I mean, as bad as fiat is, the arbitrariness and inflation, everything else. It wasn't always that way, but our modern currencies are this.
Yeah.
You can't trace a dollar. Yeah, there's a serialization on each one. Who's tracking that? I don't know. But it's pretty private, even though we're kind of tossing that with these CBDCs, which is another. I'm glad you spoke about that, and you do mention it in your white paper, and I do think that's a surveillance tool, which if you'd like to go more, you may. But
I've spoken about it before. If people want to look up CBDC versus Litecoin, I give a relatively good presentation for a Sunday. But that, I think that just really for the top line, it's for those that don't know, because also I must say, not a lot of people have done a great job of explaining them. So that's another thing. But central bank digital currency. So you've got the central bank of a government or a country issuing currency. And the plan is to reissue that currency. So the money, the physical cash you were talking about, to start phasing that out and start replacing it with a digital, a digital version. So it's a digital fiat. In my opinion, the path has been laid for the convenience. So you think about, I don't know about you, but it doesn't even cross my mind anymore when I tap and go, or when I send money to someone overseas. Remittance is not that hard anymore, or when I spend money overseas or do anything. So those conversions that happen digitally, that are all tokenized in the back end of the banking system. So I also, full disclosure, I co-founded a digital bank at some point, and so I know a little bit about banking system. Not enough. Again, I know always just like this much about something.
Enough to get something done.
Yeah, just enough to lose a lot of money. No, but I think that it really is. It's just the digitization of the money. But then everyone just says it's just. But I go, it has your name on it. So from the moment it gets prescribed to you, or it arrives and gets replaced, so it replaces your fiat, your natural fiat, call it your native fiat, with this e-fiat, it has your name attributed to it. And your face is quite literally on money. It's a cool thing, right? Like, everyone wants to be on money, president. But I don't want to be on my money. Well, I can be on other people's money, but it defeats the purpose, in my opinion, of any other privacy tool in your life as well. Because even paying for a VPN, well, they're going to know you pay for a VPN. It sort of, unfortunately, money is a catalyst for so many endeavors. And so I think it's probably the most crucial thing to concentrate some energy on. And I also have an idea for energy, which effectively become your own mint, which is not a novel idea. People have had that idea, but again, it's sort of packaging up for the layperson and making it available, but that's not ready to discuss really. But yeah, that's the scary thing about CBDCs. And the other scary thing is that the vast majority of the world's GPD. How come I can never say that?
It's okay.
It's controlled by a certain number of countries, and those countries are 98% of them are in some state of forming their CBDC. So it's really scary. Australia's pilot failed. It was awesome.
Failure is good in these regards. Yes. Let's root for way more failure.
Yeah. I just find it so weird how they failed when we were making our own tokens in like 2016. Like, it's not that hard.
Governments can't figure it out. Yeah. Don't tell them to fork it or anything, but.
Well, what are they forking? So this is the other thing, and no one talks about open banking anymore, but I don't think there was much cooperation internationally between, this is all skeptical. I don't have, people inside central banks. But I can't see any other reason than lack of cooperation, that open banking didn't go where it was meant to. So what are they going to fork? The US one? The Chinese one? Absolutely not.
Right. Fair enough. I think something with CBDCs that I think is insidious too I mean, already most of our money is digital, and you've already spoken to this. Some places are worse than others, but the first world Western nations aren't really utopia. In fact, in your paper, you mentioned household names, MasterCard, Visa, and I believe those are both, at least their starting days. They're global, but they started here in the U.S. And I think that was the old. So two things. The first insidious point of the CBDC is I think it's going to have a presentation of privacy. Like, the bank I'm using now, it's not like you can, without hacking me, go in and see my balance. That's a great thing. In fact, Bitcoin doesn't have that if you know an address. And Litecoin, the clear channel doesn't either, which is why what was built on it, which is genius and very much needed. So you can have it both ways. But I think the CBDC will look a lot like what we have now, and it will be private to you. You won't know what I'm doing, but my government will know everything I'm doing, much more than now, because currently it's buckets. Now, I don't know how much subpoenaing they need to do or whatever. If legally to go in, they'd have to say, hey, Visa, give me the data, or hey, MasterCard or Bank of America, whatever you're using. It's a little bit harder, rather than saying everything's coming from the Fed, But with the CBDC, at least in the United States, you'd have basically, the banks would definitely have drawing, and that's this whole Fed now thing at the Fed, but likely the individual will be tethered right into the central bank, which is terrifying. Now, we might think, I'm in China and traveling's easier than it's ever been. It knows everything I want to do before I want to do it. That's terrifying. Yes, some people might find it convenient and neat and a benefit of our times, but it's also an apocalypse right around the corner with that sort of thing. That's my personal opinion. I mean, that's a lot of data.
I think you're right. I think that if I were the central bank of any country, I would be framing it up in exactly that way. I think that it's also right. Like it's not incorrect or false in making that claim that it affords you more privacy. I will say this though, I guess it's the idea that you can see more that gives you more confidence. So there are no hidden fees. There are no hidden transactions. There's no fraud in essence, with some are going to claim this. So a lot of that sort of, all those hidden costs, the transparency that will come with the CBDC, I think actually gives the person a bit more power. But again, there's like tiers of financial literacy, right? Like in being in first world countries, we have relatively high financial literacy. I mean, it depends on what socioeconomic group you belong to, but generally it's pretty high. But then are we lazy because we've always had this literacy and therefore, we don't really research or care, it's about convenience. And so I don't know, I find that the people who are most interested in new ideas and new technologies and bridging the gap between the technical and the masses, they tend to be the people that have never had the thing which is trying to come to life. And so the people that have been reaching out to me about VPM have been these people that actually need it, that would benefit from it, that come from countries that are not US or Australia, and they're in a state of need, and their CBDC, who gives a shit? They'll use it if it works. If it doesn't, experience hyperinflation overnight, like if it stems the bleeding, awesome. But they're also the ones who are most willing to volunteer time. They're the most active in terms of asking questions and pressing me to explain things better because they want it, they need it, and that's really promising. I find it quite a nice thing because if you go back to the cypherpunk days, you've got all these people that are coming full circle again on Bitcoin, and the Jamison Lops of this world, and I don't know how free you want to be in the world, but he's pretty free, and he's got some interesting sort of neo cyberpunk things that he's got going on, and that's cool. I think he's done a lot of good, by the way. But I think you got to remember that it all started because of people looking for a better way. And now everyone's talking about spot ETFs, and people on my, who follow me on Twitter, who are very few, but they won't see me posting about that, or not in a positive light. And in fact, I sort of have been active in saying that I don't really want to be active in saying we need a spot ETF. Mm-hmm. Because there's a huge, if you look at Litecoin just as the example, 8.2 million roughly active wallet addresses. Well, there's 1.6 billion people using a VPN. Let's tap into that. Let's not go back to Wall Street, and provide another investment product for them to create another, separation between classes and another generation of people being left behind. It's a no-brainer for me.
Here. Well said. I think this entire idea is sort of going back to first principles, and it's a lot bigger than sitting on X and posting and price speculating. Not saying that, again, I think there's a role for the speculator. There's a role for seeing where are things going, and we give some energy to that. But the old days of Bitcoin, was, how do we bank the unbanked and all these sorts of things, more of social economic causes. Like, we need better money. Like, the money's bad, and like the money is bad, and that didn't change. Yeah, we have NFTs and trading, and we got kind of, I'm going to say we lost our way. And I know we have ordinals, and I think they're cool, and we have NFTs, and I'm not saying we need to throw that stuff out, but I'm saying the primary purpose of these things was not for these. It was for money. That's my opinion. I believe we can read the Satoshi paper. The original reason for Litecoin as this is money more than anything else. Now, we can sandbox other things, and those are cool. I think they're exciting. We've covered them on this show. But at the end of the day, Litecoin is money. It's become a better money with MWeb. And that's what the world needs. And yes, we can look at the modern financial instrumentation of these things. And I'm guilty too, LTCN. That's the one kind of publicly traded instrument in the US that is kind of cool for Litecoiners. Like, hey, we actually have presence there. Somebody thinks this stuff's valuable after getting kicked around for how long for price, because that's where everybody wants to talk about. But zooming out here, that's irrelevant. Like, what you're describing, I think, is very important and gives us the bigger picture. Like, this isn't another vehicle for speculation on a traditional, legacy stock number go up sort of scheme. You're talking about, like, the old days. How are we actually making the world better? How are we making you freer? What tools are we giving you with Litecoin?
For us, go ahead. For us, it's I mean, like, for me, sorry. I mean, it's not the currency to speculate on, right? Like, when people talk about price, I have no problem with people talking about price, but they sit in a different bucket to me, which they're speculators, right? And that's cool. I speculate on other stuff. I've got a bunch of cards behind me. I love collecting sports cards. I don't know why. I don't even watch the sports.
You're not allowed. Not me, but the world, I think, has joined you in that.
I just like collectibles. And I mean, some people like NFTs, and some people, that's cool. For the purpose of what I'm talking about and what you just discussed, as a currency, as a money, sure, in America, Australia, people are annoyed when the price doesn't move for months. When people are in Venezuela or Brazil or basically anywhere like that isn't, first world, and some first world places are experiencing. I mean, anyway, like, you go anywhere war torn, which is basically half the planet. It's like that they want stability. Mm-hmm. That's why they used to treasure gold. Excuse the mix of words there, or metaphors or words. But that's also what was destroyed by Wall Street because of paper gold.
Yes.
And the trading of that, and first world economies trading paper gold, and people like us trading paper gold to make money off of suckers in countries that can't afford to lose. And I think that, cryptocurrency was always going to have its, what's his name? Sam Bankman-Fried or whatever the fuck, like, who cares? Him they're always going to have the world coins. They're always going to have these people that are preying on the less literate, or that are preying on people that want to make money, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money. But in a world where $20 means something to you, I mean, I'd be cool with having half a Litecoin for months and months and months if that meant the world to me.
Yeah.
And it was actually I wrote a piece about the Litecoin futures. And the most fascinating piece of Coinbase's submission to this CFTC, or in my opinion, was the comparison to oil futures and to gold futures of Litecoin, and across a protracted period. Sorry, it's like 9:30 here, but usually I'm awake. I don't know why I'm so tired today.
I make my guests go through all sorts of, trials to get on here. So everybody needs to know that about Robbie right now. The inconvenient times for both of us, and we're halfway across the world, so we do our best.
Yeah. Look at the wrinkles, and I'm exhausted, man. But I looked at that, and it was over a protracted period of time. It was 18 months or 2 years, and I forget, and I'm happy to send you it so you can see it. But it's in there that they make the comparison, and Litecoin is less volatile than gold and oil futures, I should say. And I thought about that, and I went, that's awesome. I've got something to talk to Dad about on the weekend, but also they're two of the best known commodities in the world. And one of them is very well known, being gold, as being a good store of value. And when people talk about store of value, I hate doing this because you sound like an asshole when you do it, but it's like, can you explain to me what a store of value is? I just ask people because I'm curious whether they know or not, because I can then try and explain it to them if they don't, not being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
But most people just go, like sort of, but a store of value, that's something that's not volatile. It stores value, it holds value, holds its value. And I think that's awesome. And that's what's needed in a lot of the world. And fork Litecoin, you can fork it. You can fork Bitcoin. And this is what people can do. And this is why there's Sushi Swap and all these things. And they're great for people that want to make millions off other people suffering, great. But if you want to solve the problem of banking the unbanked, which Bitcoin never did, and I'm really sad to hear about all these scams that happened in Africa and stuff where, you can imagine being offered this opportunity for the first time to be banked, and then it coming crashing down on you would just be shattering. And yeah, I'm in the camp where I don't want Litecoin to get a spot ETF. I don't want it to go to $400. Sorry. I want it to be stable and less volatile. Fork whatever you want. Fork something else. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I don't manage it,
Yeah. Robbie doesn't manage Litecoin.
No. No, I'm happy to show you my wallet balances. It goes to a card store, and that's about it.
Well, you're correct in terms of, wild price swings does not make for good money either. How do you price anything in it? Again, if we're going to use this as money to calculate goods, services, and the values of things, like stability is the best.
But you forget, people go, one Litecoin's one Litecoin.
That is correct. Always it will be one Litecoin. Yeah.
I agree with you, right? But you've got to understand, one Litecoin is not one potato. You know what I mean?
Right.
Every single day.
Yeah.
That's what you've got to. It's not the fungibility, which also is another word no one understands, and I just stop using it.
Fungibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One Litecoin will always be one Litecoin. I agree with that, right? But the price of one Litecoin will not always be the price of one Litecoin. And I even argued about, anyway, like the circulating supplies in different countries, and therefore forcing premiums on things. And someone was saying, well, that's not true. And I'm like, I'm now getting in the weeds of confusing myself. But anyway, that's not my view of what money should be. And this is why I don't think there's been a successful global currency ever. Because you think about like the concentration of wealth has always been where the commodities have been. And so when I say global currency, you could argue that oil is one and gold is one, but it's also centralized. Like the wealth is centralized in countries, and then the people that benefit from those commodities are not always the ones that hold it. And there's wars and shit like that. But name me a truly universal currency that has ever worked. And I don't think there is one except for, fundamental bartering or something like that. And so that would be a brilliant thing. And with the penetration of the internet being, I haven't looked at the latest stats because they don't even interest me anymore. It's everywhere now. You can access the internet if you need it. That was the barrier. So, even when Bitcoin was released in 2008, 2009, came to prevalence, and then internet usage was still not that high in certain countries and regions, and stability in access. Now it's not a problem. Now the barrier is really, one, there is not, aside from a stable coin, but then you go, it's always pegged to a fiat. So that's dumb. But there's no universal currency. And I don't think there could ever be a universal currency. But one thing I do think there could be is a universal idea and a universal need. And so I don't think that VPM should be agnostic. I don't think it should just be for Litecoin.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I'm hoping that it gets, because of, I guess, the reverse compatibility with Bitcoin being forked, but being a fork of Bitcoin, and, SegWit being proof that, it's a decent test bed. And I hate saying that because everyone says that, but it worked, right?
It is, though. It goes both ways.
Yeah, it swings both ways, right? So, it can go to Bitcoin and then quite easily be forked into any number of altcoins. So you could have this really cool, I guess, feature of that money, and it wouldn't, you can choose which one you tie your VPM to. Just like you choose your internet service provider, or, it becomes a choice then. And so if people want to choose Litecoin, not Bitcoin, or I don't think Vitalik would ever adopt it, but an ERC20 token does, heaven forbid, that is your choice, right? And I think that's also the beauty of it, is that I think that the world needs choice. And that's why there hasn't been a successful universal currency. Because there's, you look at Brexit, for instance, and that was all about pride, national pride. For fucking what? Do you know what I mean? And the euro, we don't, it's like, but people are proud of their currency. People are proud, and you see that on the internet. People are proud of Bitcoin, they're maximalists. They're proud of Litecoin, they're maximalists. And that's cool, you can have that. Keep it. Keep your maximalism, keep your pride, keep your community. That's really important. But if there's an idea that can permeate and translate across all, that would be brilliant.
And with VPM, it would be confidentiality and privacy. I was going to ask you about that because your white paper does say, why use Litecoin in that section? It does say Litecoin is the first currency to be incorporated into the virtual private money. So are you envisioning like an app sort of platform for this? Like, for example, I have a VPN, I spin it up, I can choose which geolocation I want to go into, maybe in this circumstances, whether or not I want to use Litecoin now, or maybe Monero or some other privacy that's stronger or less private, depending on your needs. Is that what you're seeing that you want to build, or am I just putting another analogy that does not exist?
What?
Other than that, we have to pay for our VPNs. But Litecoin, if we choose Litecoin, it's very, very inexpensive. So tell us more.
There is a way around that. Anyway, so it's interesting. I thought about this. I thought about, okay, well, I've been thinking for months since March about how to increase adoption of MWeb. And it wasn't just the name, and it wasn't just the inability to explain it, and it wasn't just the kernels and the pegs and all these things, right? It was what you're talking about, the user experience. And I couldn't, for the life of me, I had a few ideas that maybe would have bumped, usage up a little bit, but nothing that would change. At one stage I estimated there are only a few hundred people that were using MWeb, and I thought that was just such a waste, of this brilliant, and it truly is a brilliant technology. And congratulations and thank you to, Thomas, he changed his name a few times. The dude who wrote the original Mimblewimble paper. Thomas is...
Jedusor? Is it the...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was some sort of Harry Potter name, yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you very much if you're listening. And then, obviously, David Burkett and everyone who worked on, the extension blocks and MWeb and bringing it to what it is today. But I couldn't for the life of me work out how to improve the user experience other than to blow it up and start again. And I thought that would be dumb. And so VPM was much more than just a name. It was the start of me thinking about this much bigger, grander, and grandiose and crazy and fucking you've got a god complex type thing, it really is not very cool to think like this. But
well, I think it's probably good to bring MWeb outside of core only. I mean, I love core, but I don't think what you're doing sounds too ridiculous now.
Oh, you're about to hear it. So I then realized that I'd been staring at the biggest onboarding tool ever, which was just a VPN. And if you look at something like Proton, so Proton started out with its making a name for itself with its email server, Proton Mail, and now it's one of the most adopted VPNs, and it's because people trust them as a security service. And I go, hang on a second, they've got 100 million plus users, and they all have money. They all use money every day. It'd be pretty simple to add that as a feature to their security service. And then I started looking at Nord, and it was even easier. And I started looking at FreeVPN, it was even easier. And I started envisioning what you're talking about with the user experience and also the user interface, and making it as simple as I tried to sort of elicit in the white paper, but this idea of, the clear Litecoin, and then quite literally toggling to dark mode and it being sent with VPM. And one day you're using Sushi Coin or something, and then you toggle to VPM and Bitcoin and VPM. And so I like this idea of the agnostic chain. The only thing and again, I want it to be picked up by anyone. This is completely an open source idea, or I don't even know whether you can open source an idea. It's just a fucking idea, right? It's not, I want everyone and anyone to take it. The only ones I don't want to take are like Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Bill Gates, if you're listening, you've had enough. But yeah, so there's been a level of copyright and protection around the IP, and that is purely because of that. And I'm gonna get absolutely kicked for saying this because everyone keeps kicking me. The vision is to make it as free as possible, if not free, everywhere, and try and mandate that, because it would be contradictory to the idea and the philosophy which is I'm trying to permeate, I guess.
And what you're describing would be released on VPM.run. VPM.run.
No, I would look at so very, very early stages right now. And I mean, again, I'm happy to say this and it's not confidential in any way. I just won't name the names, but very early stages of talking to VPNs, so virtual private networks, about using this, because they've not really considered, or those who have considered it before have not been able to actually work out how to make it happen. And so, yeah, it would hopefully one day it's flicking on a light, a partnership, an integration with one of these VPNs and making it accessible instantly to hundreds of millions. And I think that would be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of that too is that, I mean, VPN.run gets a couple of thousand visits a day, which is crazy, by the way, but it gets like quite a lot of traffic. I didn't expect that, but it's not, I've set it up on a terrible, like it was just me on a plane on the way to Nashville. Like it's not, there's nothing robust about it. There's no huge server behind it or decentralized servers behind it, should I say. And the user experience is shit, and it's downloading core, and I haven't even gotten to other things. But if it exists in something you're already familiar with and the user experience you're already familiar with, and all it is a new feature, and you get an email that pings and it says this new feature, VPM, blah, 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 relative privacy for your money, or a little notification if you enable them, or just you happen to spot it in your settings. That's brilliant, because, it's native to the experience and to what the user already understands. So why try and change a behavior when you can just lean into the behaviors of hundreds of millions?
Very cool. I was curious of how you'd flesh this out, because again, the website has some things, the white paper, et cetera, but more was alluded to, and we're seeing this stuff come. Much of it's still the idea without the flesh, but you're fleshing it. It sounds like you're working on this, and I'm glad you are. And I'm going to ask in a little bit how people can help you do what you're doing, whether it's through light.space or something else if you need volunteers. But I didn't know if you were building a standalone app, you'd point it to your website and go from there, but you're wanting to leverage what already exists. So we could see a Proton having a facet within it, utilizing Litecoin first, and then maybe others as appropriate and as it makes sense and as people would want. That's amazing. That's a big idea.
That'd be incredible, right?
It's a big
That'd
idea.
Be cool.
That's a very cool
really
idea.
Cool.
I'd like it on my VPN. I would use it.
But this is crazy, and I talk to my psychologist, but not too many other people about it, because it's really grandiose, and it's a silly idea to think that you can affect change like this. And I don't know. It's very early days in discussions with these people, but I know, having worked and built things, never as successful as those, but it's not that hard to adopt and integrate new technologies. And the beautiful thing about Litecoin is that it is light. And, I don't profess to know everything about it, but to incorporate it is not too difficult. And it also wouldn't have to be incorporated because it runs on its own core, and it's already got its own decentralized network of nodes. And anyway, rambling, and people more technical can explain it better, but it doesn't need to be fully integrated to be fully integrated. But I guess the first cab off the rank would be looking at wallets that already are integrating MWeb and using them as kind of test beds for bigger things. Would be really great. Like Vic, if you're listening from Cake Wallet, thanks very much for the free hoodie or whatever you gave us at the Litecoin Summit, and please sponsor next year. Don't hate the Litecoin Foundation because of me. But I think it'd be silly to not try VPM as a user experience. And quite honestly, the idea of having a clear and a dark, or a clear and a slightly opaque Litecoin, and a toggle, I don't see why that would be difficult for the front end or the back end. In fact, I know it's not. And so I would do that Cake Wallet. That would be great. And then Light Wallet, and then everyone else can follow. But the really big thing would be giving the opportunity and the ability for this virtual private money to people that are never going to understand Litecoin, and they're never going to want to understand Litecoin, and they don't care. And there's really cool stuff happening in the world, which I don't know, I haven't looked into it enough, but the idea of Apple now offering their rails, and so you can bypass the MasterCards and the Visas and stuff. That's really exciting, because all of a sudden you don't have to have, they haven't been specific about this, but the way I've interpreted it is that you wouldn't have to have the traditional banking licenses that you would normally, and the traditional associations with payment rails like the Visas, MasterCards, and Amexes of this world, which control everything. And they do. It's not a conspiracy. They actually just
do.
And so this would allow you to use VPM at point of sale with relative ease. And that solves another big issue, which is, everyone gets worried about trying to convince merchants. Well, you don't have to. You don't have to tell the merchant. You don't even have to think. You don't have to think about swapping between currencies and, how much is that really in dollars? I'll just use dollars because I can't do the conversion of Litecoin in my head, and all that kind of stuff. That is becoming easier already, and it will only become more easy.
Yeah, and using Litecoin without knowing it is also a possibility, which might be what you're describing. And because again, Litecoiners know MWeb. We know it's there. Some of us use it, some of us don't. Crypto kind of knows a little bit. You diffuse out, but to get everybody, they don't have to know they're using Litecoin to get the results and benefits of Litecoin. And this invisible technology behind the scenes, which is invisible nodes behind that scene. It's tiered and it's durable and it works. And of course, we have our memes. We've never been down, and it's all good. So I'm excited for what's coming here, sir.
That's a cool thing, right? Like, invisible technology is the best technology in my opinion, because you don't need to explain it. It just works. Electricity, it's running through. I don't know. Like, I work in energy, during my day job. I don't really know how this works. I do, but not really.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I don't need to.
Yeah, we don't have to anymore.
No. So, yeah, I think that if you want to know the really grandiose vision, it would be to have VPNs adopt this, because of, again, like the analogy came because of the drivers and the behaviors and the benefits being almost identical to those of VPN for VPM. And so when people go, you get confused between them, I'm like, that's fine, because they're almost interchangeable. So I go, why do you use a VPN? And there's been huge studies, and I'm going to publish some facts on the website soon, but just because I'm sick of repeating them and getting them slightly wrong, and then someone arguing about it, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I dropped 100 people off the billion. Anyway, but the vast majority of people using VPNs now are not using them for Netflix and for geo-blocked stuff. They're using them to send money to their friends, their family, their business, their suppliers, their contacts, their colleagues overseas. They're using it to send to people within their own country, and send more than a restriction that's been put on them. So in China, you can have the amount of money you send restricted. You can have it stopped altogether. So forget investing, forget speculating. It's like you can't even send $100 overseas. And so I think that the grandiose idea would be that they almost become symbiotic, because the benefits of using a VPN are exactly the same as a virtual private money. It affords you relative privacy. You are relying on some centralized system, but it has a decentralized network of nodes behind it. That means it can't be taken down in theory. I'm like, geez, we're getting pretty good here. This analogy is pretty tight. I go, what else do you use it for? I use it for counter surveillance. It's not being surveilled. Tick. That's why I'd use money rather than using my card. All the scenarios, the use cases, the benefits, the attributes, I think they're almost interchangeable. So if people hear me say VPN instead of VPM, fine. The idea is that they live together. They're housemates. And that's cool.
Well said. Well said. I think there is a lot there. And I'll leave your words stand and not add any. Maybe we'll go this way. We live in an environment, some of this surveillance we can't control, and we'll end here. I just want to hear from Robbie.
Oh God, this can be interesting.
We live in an environment where a lot of this stuff is happening despite our consent, right? While these systems like Visa and Master probably initially got to where they are via consent, and then they just got so gigantic, and the corporate government relation and the benefit and all that stuff. But in 2024, we have a lot of voluntary surveillance.
Can I say one thing?
Go ahead.
The consent thing always has a rationale.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about probably the greatest change for Visa and MasterCard was the introduction, post 9/11 of the AML KYC.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was many years after 9/11, but it was to stop terrorism, right? The capping, the limit. And then I guess the reporting of any suspicious transaction, and that transaction could be anything up to $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And anything over was deemed suspicious unless it was from a bank to a bank or whatever. That wouldn't be suspicious.
Of course not.
Of course not. And now they've gone further, and it's I forget what it's called, but they've signed an agreement where they can hand over the property of intellectual property. The customer property and the private information between rails if they suspect anything. So it's now suspicion, and so it's always this need, and it's cloaked in this idea of creating a better society. So terrorism, no one really wants terrorism. Like maybe a few terrorists do, but that's not good for the world, right? So yeah, I'll do this consent thing, and I'll opt in, and anti-money laundering is actually quite good, right? This is good, but the central bank digital currency will go another tier, and that will be not a need to stop terrorism, but a need to be better with commerce, to trade more freely. It'll be opening up your world, right, rather than closing it down, or on the surface at least. And I think this consent thing is always about, it's always preceded by a need or a desire for a better world. And so my hope is that if presented before these people, we present a better idea for the world, that maybe people will opt into that, and maybe they can give consent to a genuine better idea, one that it might be a spectacular failure, but it's going down with all the other VPNs, if that's the case. And listen, if Nord, Proton, and everyone just go down, and VPM is tied to it, that's something spectacular has happened. Anyway, I just wanted to say that about the consent thing, because I think this consent, to me, in the financial world, has always been about a better world.
Yeah. Yes, I think there's a lot of advantages that are accepted, and then things change over time. I wanted to kind of create there's these consents which you described, and then these evolutions, but then there's also, social media. That's where I really want to boil it down to. Lots and lots and lots and lots of voluntary surveillance that we're each responsible for ourselves. I don't have to post pictures of my dog, the inside of my house, my family meetings. Some
Right.
things, traditionally, private things, it was okay to keep them private. We're in a very transparent kind of culture now with these media platforms. So some people may not have any desire for what you're talking about. And maybe that's my concern or fear. However, and I hope we can end with some positivity despite this sort of negative approach to it, is privacy for everybody, even in this age? Is it palatable, even in this age that we live in with lots of voluntary self-surveillance?
I say if you don't need it, then don't use it, because you're going to be clogging up some network. Even though Litecoin, you can go to litecoin.space or lite.space or whatever Loshan ends up calling the Explorer. You can see the blocks aren't full, and extension blocks make them even less full, and it's all going to be okay. Like, unless billions of people are using it a day, which would be great, it's still not going to slow things down. So go ahead. But if you don't need to use it, don't use it. And I think that it's people of means enough. It's only invest what you're willing to lose, right? Well, I think it's like the reverse. Like if you can lose so much that you don't have any care for privacy and you don't have any need for it, and you can take that dick pic off the internet, or you can, do whatever you want in Russia and not get bashed for being gay, or not thrown off a building in an Arab state, go for it. Go for it. Keep doing that. Because also you're burning through your cash and giving it to someone else. That's cool.
Mm.
You have too much money, too much means. For me, I am of means. I have a house. I don't own the house, but it is a nice dwelling. My kids are well fed. I have a car. I have a good job. I can do things. I can go on holidays. I can save if I was any good at it. The vast majority of the planet can't do that. And so I also think that the vast majority of the planet can't afford to be lax with privacy. I accept all cookies when I jump on your website. I do the things which I'm not meant to do. And I'm sure I'm going to have to stop doing that and blow up my entire life at some point and start again. But honestly, I do that because it's, what am I really losing? Someone's going to steal a couple $100 from my bank account. That's a fucking bad day, but it's not going to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
What an asshole. What a privileged asshole. And then you go overseas, and I work with a couple of Lebanese people, and we rocked up to work the other day, and I'm looking at them, and then I look at the news, and I'm like, fuck, going over checking if they're all right. And it's we're okay. We're hardy. Our families are hardy. But I'm like, what the fuck? If a giant bomb just got dropped on even Canberra in Australia, and no one cares about Canberra, right? And no one even lives there, even though it's the capital. I think it's bullshit. But even if a giant bomb dropped, that would be devastating. That would be devastating. We don't live, or I don't live in a terrifying country. I don't live in a country where it's hard to get a job and even harder to keep one. I don't live in a country where there's hyperinflation, where there's extreme poverty, where there is a lack of food security, energy security, water security. That those are not things that come up on my radar. We're talking about a grid, an energy grid, which can't actually deal with how much energy is being pumped through it. You go to India and you're lucky to get in some little communities an hour of stable internet a day because of an hour of stable electricity a day. And so that affects schooling, education, that affects ability to do commerce, anything, cook, clean, whatever you want to do. I don't have any of those problems. We have an outage. It's oh my God, what is this? What? I can't use the internet. Someone got, I better have a power bank on why have I got a power bank sitting next to me? That wasn't a setup. I've got power banks charged just in case. Why? Anyway, so long rant, but I'm I can afford to be less vigilant with my privacy. But I am in the top 0.1%, and I would suggest that the vast majority of people who are owning and speculating on digital assets are in the same bucket.
Well said. And you remind us to be grateful for what we have, those that do have. And I think we share some things with the first world countries, despite their names and regions. There's a lot of baseline stability that we do have and we do enjoy. So, well, sir, terrific conversation. I'm excited to see what's going on with VPM. I think it's very needed. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people will be pouring in. And I think that's what's so exciting about this, is because you're talking about billions and helping billions. And that's a big idea. I mean, Litecoin's already here for billions. Fair enough. But what the avenue that you may be able to create with this and are creating with this is a new way to connect to this great network that's already serving the world. So we're back to
honestly, this video will be studied by psychologists about like, this is what a manic episode looks like, and this is what mania looks like, and what a grandiose idea and self-inflated confidence looks like. I'm aware of how stupid and how crazy it seems, but why not try? And there are so smart people. There are so many smart people, and the technology's there and it exists. And so, you asked me if there was anything anyone could do. I guess it would just be like, give it a crack. If you can help in any way. So if you know an exec at a VPM, well, firstly, like, enjoy your cocaine on the weekend, but secondly, send them my way. We're in discussions with a few very early stages, but I'd love to speak to some execs and move more quickly. The next thing would be to actually kind of take stock of what's going on in your life, and can you afford to be private and less private? And if you can, well, then maybe volunteer some of your time and your skills to VPM, because there's a lot of people that can't. So you can donate your time just via email and say what you're good at in the subject line, and I'll get round to reading it. I absolutely promise eventually. Keep them short. And yeah, hopefully some volunteers, and not accepting donations at the moment because there's nothing to donate to. If you would like to donate to the developers, please do. Litecoin Core. So if you go to light.space and support Core, please support them. Please support the foundation, because it affords me however many hours. I do it anyway, but people like me and people at the foundation and the things that the foundation do, the ability to do those things. So please donate to that, but don't donate to VPM. We don't need it yet because it's just me and I'm just lobbying. And if and when we need money, I'll do a call out, but hopefully it can be sustainable by itself. And I see no reason, if we're not charging for it, and again, I'm going to get kicked for this, but I'm not backing down, everyone. I would love for it to be free forever, but we'll see. Then there's no need. It'll be right.
Okay, well, very good. You ended very well. I don't think there's anything else I want to add. We know where to find you on Twitter, Robert F. Coleman. We can go to vpm.run, which the white paper that you wrote is available there to review, as well as your email, how to contact you. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in this idea to reach out to Robbie and see how you can help him. So any other final thoughts before we end the show, sir?
No, I'd just say, honestly, it's not a replacement for MWeb. I just want to actually go on the record maybe and say that, just to settle all the confusion. I'm not some Trojan horse to like ruin MWeb's party. There's been a lot of accusations flying around about some certain things. This was completely proactive, and not the acne cream, but I probably need some. This was an idea, and it was possibly years in the making. Who knows how long I've been subconsciously thinking about it and MWeb. But it is to make sure that MWeb is used, because it is not being used wide enough. The technology is not being used broadly enough. And just like so many great technologies, people don't need to know the name of them. And so if they can be onboarded through a much more friendly, accessible, easier to understand shopfront like VPM or virtual private money, please just, I get that you have your history with MWeb, but just you can keep it. I'm not trying to get rid of it, but just let's move forward. That'd be great. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's party. I'm trying to have more parties.
Very good, sir. Very good. Well, friends, thank you for listening. Robbie, thank you for joining us. Of course, visit 84million.com/podcast to see this episode visually or find out where you can stream it. It's available where you get your podcast. So thank you to all of our folks who listen wherever you are in the world. Do check Robbie out on his X account. Do visit vpm.run, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.